All right, back here on Keeping It Real with Alexander Garrett. We are going to the heartland of America, St. Louis, because that's where the hotbed of controversy is right now. And Dino Costa, you are joining my podcast for the very first time from St. Louis. Thanks for joining me, man.
This is so unexpected and so thrilling. It is one of the highlights of my career to be on with the great Alex, and it's great to be here. I miss you, Guy, and I miss the people there at 970 AM. You still with 970?
I am, and we're doing good there. And obviously, I brought you on to talk a little politics later, but let me tell you first of all, what is going through the mind of St. Louis right now? They got to be revved up. I mean, they lost a bad game. First of all, giving up the goal with 59 seconds left to tie it, and then in overtime, that whole disaster. What's the feeling like down in St. Louis right now?
Yeah, it's, people were understandably upset with what happened in Game 3 of the Western Conference Finals between the Blues and the Sharks, and it was a terrible way to lose that hockey game. But I think that now, a day or two later, going into Game 4 tonight, Alex, they've got to do their best to put it out of their mind as quickly as possible because, as I said on my show last night, they didn't lose the series as the result of that awful way that Game 3 ended. So there's still a lot of hockey to be played, hopefully, for the Blues. And this is obviously a must-win game tonight. They can't go down 3-1 in the series. And I think that, as I've been saying on my show, Alex, I think that they're going to use the Game 3 loss and the way that everything went down in overtime on the Carlson goal that ended up beating them. I think they're going to use it to their advantage, play with a chip on their shoulder, come out hungry and motivated tonight, get the series tied up at 2-2, and then go on the road for Game 5 in San Jose. And the Blues have been a tremendous road hockey team throughout the second half of the season and on into the Stanley Cup playoffs. In each of the 3 series that they've played, they've won games on the road with consistency. So as bad as the loss was the other night, I think that Craig Berube, the head coach, and the Blues players have put that behind them because they have no other choice. And
by the way,
Binnington
is amazing. Binnington is amazing. I mean, the kid is just he led that rebound from January, did he not?
Everything started with him. The turnaround started with him, and I think he should win the Calder as the rookie of the year. And although in the last couple of games, he has not looked as good as he looked earlier. And one of the things that I've been talking about on my show is, he has never been, since he's turned professional, Alex, he's never been the clear number one in the minors. So the most games he's played in the season has been 50. And, of course, the workload that he generated in the second half of the season after he was named the number one goaltender and on into the postseason now where you're playing every other night, one of the things that I've asked myself and wondered is if some of the fatigue is starting to catch up with Jordan Binnington now. Is this some of the reason why he hasn't looked as sharp the last couple of games? The Blues are going to ride him as long as they can, and I don't anticipate any kind of a change in goal. But he has been phenomenal. He's been tremendous, and the Blues play very well in front of him. And another reason to like the Blues' chances tonight going into Game 4 is that he's got a terrific record. I think he's 9-2 after losses this year. So the Blues have got a lot of confidence in him. I think he's got confidence in himself, and I look for him to bounce back tonight, and I look for the Blues to bounce back tonight.
Now, you talk about, by the way, you're on 590 The Fan. Tell us a little bit about that show that you've been talking about. You say you've been talking about this on your show. Tell us about the show, Dino.
Yeah, the show is on. It's an overnight show. It starts Central Time at 11 p. And it goes to 1 a.m., and it's on 5 nights a week. It starts on Sunday night, and it goes to Thursday night. So last night was the final show of this week. But I'm having a real good time doing the show, Alex, and working with a lot of great people. The staff at 590 The Fan is terrific, and they have made it very, very easy for me to transition into the show over the last 5 months. And it's just a real kick to be able to talk about, what's going on with the Blues and the Cardinals. And one of the challenging things I think about doing a show in St. Louis is because there are only 2 professional teams, content and procuring content is something that I find very challenging on a night-by-night basis. So, I try to move it around a little bit and talk about not only the local scene, but also what's going on across the country with some of the hot button issues that, are making news. So, but overall, it's been a blast. I've had a lot of fun. I'm so appreciative for this opportunity to do the show, and we'll see where this goes. But right now I'm having a great time, and it's been a lot of fun, and 590 The Fan is certainly the best sports radio station in St. Louis. It's really an iconic brand that was resurrected a couple of years ago by a gentleman by the name of Randy Markell, who bought the station and brought it back to life. And slowly but surely over the years since Mr. Markell has owned the station, things have improved dramatically, and I really like the future of the station, moving forward. So.
And by the way, as we're talking, I know you're New York, and you follow the Mets, you follow the Yanks, you follow New York sports. So you're not just talking St. Louis. You have your eyes on everything. And I want to break some news to you now. Michael Conforto's on the injured list for the Mets, making things so much worse for that team, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, it's a bad break, especially since Conforto has started to hit the ball. I mean, he was really hitting on a hot streak there, and really unfortunate what happened on that shallow fly ball down the right field line, and he, obviously collided, had his face hit the shoulder of Robinson Cano. So it's, it's just another thing that the Mets are going to have to deal with here, and what so far has been an underwhelming and disappointing season, and losing 2-3 to the Nats in Washington, and now down to Miami, starting a weekend series tonight. I know they called up Carlos Gomez today, and they released Keon Broxton, or they designated him for assignment. So I think a change is needed there in the manager's position. I never bought into the hiring of Brodie Van Wagenen as the general manager. And I just think that club, that organization needs a breath of fresh air, somebody to come in and really kind of juice things up, and a different voice, a different kind of a vision from the manager. And, I'd love to see a couple different guys, whether it's Wally Backman, who I think is, he's still at this point an exceptional long shot, although I think he deserves to be a major league skipper. I would take Buck Showalter. I would take Joe Girardi. I think that there are better options out there than, a guy like Mickey Callaway, who I've maintained from almost the beginning that he's in over his head and is not a good fit for this franchise and not a good fit for the market, New York City. And the interesting thing about that is that I gave him a chance at the beginning. I was bullish on Callaway. I actually liked the selection at the time they made it, Alex. But
so did I.
Yeah, I think by the end of May last year, I had, kind of discerned that, in my way of thinking, that Callaway was the wrong fit for this club. And he's a nice guy. He's, a good pitching coach based upon the previous work he did with the Indians. But I just don't think he's a major league manager. And if he is a major league manager, I think he's the wrong fit for New York City. So.
Well, yeah, and a name floating out there now is Joe Girardi. Would be interesting to see him back in the New York managing scene, of course, with the Yanks for about 10 years. If he goes to the Mets, he might have something to do with them. He might get them to work. Girardi's
a guy that I would take. Obviously, I've got a great deal of respect for Girardi. He's a tried and true baseball man. He's been in the game all his life. He, of course, managed the Marlins first and then the Yankees for about 10 years and did a tremendous job with the Yankees during his time there, and won a World Series and had that team competing and contending every single year. And I think Girardi, who still lives in the area, still lives in Greenwich, Connecticut, would be chomping at the bit for a chance to come back. I think that in his way of thinking, I'm talking about Girardi, he
Sure.
would probably, hopefully, want to manage the Cubs because he's from that area, and I think that, depending upon what happens with Joe Madden, who's in the last year of his contract, what the Cubs may do, we don't know yet. I think that Madden probably will be extended, but I think that Girardi would jump at the chance to go back into the frying pan in New York. He obviously knows the market. He knows the media. He knows the expectations and things like that. I think Girardi would be a significant jump up in improvement in the manager's position for the Mets if they went in that direction.
And I think he would handle the media better than Callaway has. Would you agree with that?
Oh, wholeheartedly, yes, absolutely. He's savvy. He understands. He's been through the wars in New York. He dealt with the pressure of New York. He knows what the landscape is all about. So Girardi would be as I say, one of three that I'd like. Showalter as well. I'd love to see Buck Showalter because I think he's a terrific baseball man and a great strategist from the dugout, knows how to manage a pitching staff, and he's a good baseball guy. And course, Wally, who's managing the Long Island Ducks right now in the Atlantic League, not too far from Citi Field. He'd be my first choice, but if the Mets wanted to go in the direction of someone like Girardi, where do I sign on the dotted line for that?
Yeah, and by the way, speaking of the Ducks, they got a few former Mets on that team, which is kind of interesting to watch. Guys like Neuenhuis and Neese, they're on out there, and of course, I have a connection to them, Dino, because I've been good friends with Bud Harrelson for the last 12, 13 years or more through the Henry Viscardi School, my old high school, my alma mater. So I would be out there, and I'm still following the Ducks to this day, and he seems like he's doing well managing that team the first year. So we'll see how that goes.
Wally's good. Wally's. I don't think he's ever looked better. I've seen some recent pictures of him, and Wally's really been through the ringer, and is still in the game and still fighting, and I love that about him. He's going to continue, I think, until his last breath. His goal and his objective is to get back to the major leagues. And for a while it looked like perhaps if we believe Wally, that Terry Collins wanted him to be his bench coach a couple of years ago, and at the time Sandy Alderson didn't give the okay on it. But Wally's been through a lot of adversity, and he continues to fight his way onward. And I think anybody's got to have a great deal of respect for anybody like Wally Backman, who refuses to quit and just continues to go out there and try to make himself appealable to someone. So everybody that has played for Wally, there have been so many players that have gone on the record, talked about how much they love playing for him, and how smart he is, how instinctive he is. A guy who's been a two-time minor league manager of the year previously, and that whole situation that happened all those years ago when he was named the manager of the Diamondbacks, only to have the carpet pulled out from underneath him. And just a few days later, in regard to a misunderstanding about, a personal situation that happened, all that was years ago. And I think that it was presented in the wrong way, and people jumped to conclusions and rushed to judgment. And Wally's a good man and a great baseball man, and he deserves to be in the big leagues, if not with the Mets, then certainly with someone else.
By the way, if you're listening right now, this is Dino Costa, and if the voice sounds familiar, it probably is, because he's been on Mad Dog Radio with Sirius, and you still have a great friendship with Chris Russo. I hear you were on with him just a few days ago. Am I right about that?
Well, Chris and I have had battles in the past, and we had some creative philosophical differences when I was at Mad Dog Radio. But, as I like to say, that's all water under the bridge at this point. It was never really personal, I think, between either of us. And, as I say, it was years ago. And I respect Chris, and his longevity in the business speaks for itself. And I was fortunate enough to go on a show a couple of weeks ago, and was on with him for about 11, 12 minutes. Had a good time catching up with him and talking about St. Louis sports. And, he's recently signed a new contract extension with Sirius XM, and kudos to him for that. So, Chris is obviously one of the iconic names in sports radio history. And, he's still going out there every day doing that show on Sirius XM, and also has been doing the show the last couple of years on the MLB network. So, he's doing very well, and I wish him nothing but continued success.
He's doing really well on MLB Network. I've seen him a few times. He aces that show every day for MLB Network.
Believe it or not, Alex, I've never seen that show actually, but I know other people have, and it's been a hit for the MLB Network. And Chris loves baseball. There's no question about that, and is somewhat of a historian of the game. And as we all know, he lives and dies with the San Francisco Giants, and so that's a good fit, Chris on the MLB Network. I think obviously that's worked out well for him and for the network.
And so let's talk a little bit about more St. Louis sports. So obviously you mentioned the Cubs versus the Cardinals a little while ago. Have you been to a game? Have you been to see that rivalry in person? What's that like?
No, I have not been to a Cubs and Cardinals game. But hopefully maybe someday I will, but I've not been to a Cubs and Cardinals game yet. One of the things I think I should let you know, you say I'm in St. Louis. The radio show itself is in St. Louis, but I'm still out here in Wyoming where we've got a home, and with my family, and my children are still in school. And one of the other real good things about 590 The Fan is that they let me do the show from a home studio here out of my home. And so I have not, although I've spent a lot of time in St. Louis over the last couple of years, since the show has started, I've not actually been in St. Louis. It's always been from my home studio here. So,
well, it sounds like you're talking right in from St. Louis. You know it like the back of your hand, Dino.
Well, I think you gotta. It's you got to immerse yourself in the city that you're broadcasting from. And although my heart is still in New York and my teams are still in that area, I have got to pay attention, obviously, to what's going on in St. Louis and stay current with all the news and the information and so on and so forth. And I've really been into this Blues season big time, and the way they've turned the ship around. I've been watching the NHL, Alex, since the 1970s. And one of the things I've said is that in all the years I've been watching the NHL, I cannot recall a single season turnaround that has been so dramatic with a club that was dead last in the Western Conference as we hit the new year, and then turned it around so significantly and, just barged their way through the second half of the season with more wins than any other club in the league. And they came within a whisker of actually winning the division. So it's been a lot of fun to watch this team on a daily basis and watch them turn it around and watch as they've bought into new head coach Craig Berube's system and his philosophy and his vision. It's been a lot of fun, and it's an inspiring club with a lot of nice players. Binnington we mentioned, but there's a lot of great players on this team, and they've been rolling four lines for the last couple of months, and everybody's contributing. And it's been a wonderful experience watching this club and talking about this club over the last several months. And who knows what's going to happen. As you know, probably the Blues have never won a Stanley Cup championship.
That's
and the
right.
last year that they were in the Stanley Cup finals was 1970. So they're a couple wins away from getting back. And should they get there, they're going to meet a tremendous team coming out of the East in Boston, who just swept the Carolina Hurricanes. So we'll see. But I'm really excited for this game for tonight, and I'm expecting the Blues to play very well.
And by the way, it's funny how hockey works, right? So the Isles sweep through the Penguins, the Islanders, and then they get swept by the Hurricanes, who now get swept by the Bruins. I mean, this has been an almost never seen before playoffs in my lifetime anyway. Maybe in yours you've seen something like this, but I have not seen something like this where all these sweeps are happening, these big teams are going down. I mean, it's just been fascinating to watch.
The great thing about the NHL postseason, which, as I'm always prone to say, is so much better than the NBA postseason, especially, as you start with, the 16 teams and the 8 in each conference. And of course, the same is applicable in the NBA. But in the NHL, when you get to the postseason, each one of the fan bases for the 16 clubs that make the postseason, as I like to say, because the league is so parity driven the last several years, you really can make an argument and feel good as your team goes into the postseason that you can make something happen. And in this year's postseason, it's been wild and zany, and we've seen the Lightning, who had a record-setting season, get bounced out in the first round by Columbus, and then you get the Calgary, who had the most points in the West. They get bounced out in the first round. Vegas, who made it out of the West and into the finals last year, they're out. The Islanders, of course, as you mentioned, took down Pittsburgh, and then they get taken down by Carolina. And, it's been wonderful. There have been a lot of great game sevens. You've had so many overtime games. It's the NHL postseason is really, just a great thing to watch most every year. And this year has been a real special postseason, and a lot of thrills and a lot of upsets and so on and so forth.
Now, it looks like the Rangers, by the way, are going to name JD, John Davidson, who used to be the Blues president, by the way, as their president. So any thoughts on that?
I think it's a good move for the Rangers. After Sather retired, and, of course, their general manager, Jeff Gorton, I think, is doing what he can to bring that club back with a rebuild with the emphasis on the draft and younger players. And, I think they're going to be active this offseason, free agency, and explore some trades. And they've got some big decisions to make. But how do you argue with John Davidson coming back home to conclude his career? He's been a successful executive on the NHL level after a terrific broadcast career. Was with the Blues for a while, and then the new ownership came in and bought out his contract, and then he went on to Columbus, where he did a great job there. And I think Rangers fans are probably understandably very excited about JD coming back to New York and taking over the Rangers and trying to move them back up the ladder. So that's a good move. Public relations-wise for the Rangers, it's a terrific move.
You know what my first reaction was? Oh, baby! Because I love having JD back. And by the way, I'm Dino Costa. That's his Twitter. We're talking with Dino Costa on Keeping It Real with Alex Garrett. And you think he just talks sports? No. Dino gets into politics. He gets into culture. He meshes in a lot of different things. So I can't let you go, Dino, without asking you about why Mayor Bill de Blasio is running for president. What are your thoughts on that?
Man, I tell you what, Alex. If he wins the election, if he gets the nomination on the Democrat side, and then runs the country, and then wins the election and runs the country the way he's run New York City, I think we're all in for a lot of trouble. He is one of the worst mayors that New York City has ever had. New York deserves so much better from their leadership, and he is not a popular guy in New York for reasons that are too many to mention. I think he, really looked at a long road to try to get the Democrat nomination, and I just don't see the appeal. I don't see a track record career which would allow him to resonate with the entire country. And if Bill de Blasio wins the Democrat nomination, I'll be very surprised.
I'll just throw my papers in the air and say, that's it. We're done. It's over. We're over.
You're right.
Now, by the way, Dino's talking about this from experience because he would do a show here in New York from 12 a.m. to 3. He would see the streets of New York just like I do every day, rollerblading through it. Dino, what you saw must have been horrifying because you grew up here, did you not?
Grew up in New York. Was there through several, obviously, different mayoral administrations. I didn't like the Dinkin. When Rudy came in, everything changed, and he cleaned up the streets and really kind of infused New York with a new spirit, and it became destination central for people all over the world. And Rudy did a great job when he was the mayor of New York. And the only thing that was wrong with Rudy, of course, is that he's a Yankees fan just like you. But other than that, Rudy was a terrific mayor.
And by the way, Dino gets upset with me when I show him pictures from Citi Field. He's like, you belong in Yankee Stadium. What are you doing at Citi Field?
I still think, well, the thing is, if I remember, you told me you grew up a Mets fan, and then you met George Steinbrenner, and you had a nice relationship with George when he was alive. And I think that kind of swayed you over to the Yankees, and that's fine. That's okay. But I think that you still have a soft spot in your heart for the Mets a little bit. And, of course, when the Yankees and Mets meet, of course, I don't have any question you're going for the Yankees. But if the Mets do well, I don't think that bothers you too much. Am I wrong?
Well, no, it does bother me because I want the Yanks to win.
Does it really?
It does, believe it or not, because I want the Yanks to win. And look, you could be sitting me down in front of a TV in spring training. I'm still jumping up and down if they win a spring training game because that's how passionate I'm about the Yanks.
Maybe, no, I don't mean, Alex, I don't mean when the Yankees and the Mets are playing each other, but I'm talking about the Mets are playing Miami tonight.
Oh.
I mean, is it going to?
I'm older now, and I kind of want to just see them succeed. Look, we haven't had a team down Canyon of Heroes since 2012 with the Giants. I'm hungry. The city's hungry.
Yeah.
I don't know if you noticed this, actually, Dino, but the city doesn't talk about sports as much anymore. Like, you don't go to barbershops and they don't talk about sports as much as they used to, I feel. It's the city talk is so different, and there's so many transplants, so to speak, that have come here for different ideas, but and the diehard sports fans aren't really talking about it. I don't know. Maybe that's just me, but I don't hear it on the streets as much as we used to.
Yeah, I think there's something to that. I've talked about that from time to time. I think that the fabric, in some ways, Alex, of and I think this is true with a lot of different towns, but speaking specifically and strictly with New York, I think it has changed a great. I think that New York is a tremendous sports market and always has been and always will be, but I think the fan is different. I think that the mobile fan has a lot to do with that. I think that, the advent of prevalence, I should say, of is really kind of factored into that. People root for players instead of teams now. But I think there's still an appreciable amount of people who love their team, are passionate about their team, and live and die with the team on a daily basis. But it's changed a little bit, maybe a lot. You're right. You might be onto something there.
And just because I rollerblade through the city, I feel the difference. Like, it's not as sports heavy. Then again, we haven't had a winner here in the city, and I think the back of the sports pages, they're hungry for it. You see it. They were hungry when the Knicks got third pick instead of first. They're hungry when you see they fire McCagnon for the Jets. I mean, what are your thoughts on all that, too? The Jets, odd firing just a couple weeks after the draft, but I don't know. They want to contend. Is this the right move to contend, though?
I go against the grain of the popular think that is since Magnus was filed. I actually don't believe that it is any the dirty work, if you will. The draft completed, the work was kind of set. We're working with Costa.
Dino, you there? We're losing you a little bit.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now I got you. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think it's a big deal people are making it out to be, because a lot of the things that the Jets needed, they went through the fate. So now it's just a matter of getting ready for training camp in a few months and the OTAs and so on and so forth. And I think that I read something in the newspaper today out of the Daily News. Manish Mehta had a story today, and he picked up on some things with some anonymous sources that spoke with him from the Jets organization, and the disconnect between Agnes, Ace, and
hello, you there? Yeah, I got you. The disconnect between Gase and Maccagnan was there. Now, people, they were disputing it. Oh, it's not there, but it clearly was. If this is the result of everything, if him getting fired happens, obviously there's a rift there that they didn't want to admit to.
Well, the Jets have not always made the right decisions. I mean, we start there. I'm not gonna fight that thought, because it's right. And Chris Johnson has been lampooned in the last couple of days ever since the firing of Maccagnan. But I prefer to look at it in a different way. I think this was a move that needed to be made. The coach and the GM were not getting along. I never thought Maccagnan was a guy who was that profiled as the leader of an organization. I kind of look at him like I looked at Joe McIlvaine when Joe McIlvaine was the general manager. Joe McIlvaine is a terrific baseball man, but he's a scout at heart. He's not a guy who can preside over an entire organization. He didn't do well when he went out to San Diego. He didn't do well when he went to the Mets. He was a guy who was kind of out of his element as the leader of the organization. I look at Maccagnan in many of the same ways. I think Mike Maccagnan knows football. I think he knows talent, but he's a scout at heart, and I think he's a guy that would be better in a supporting role than as the guy who is leading the franchise. And so now, with everything out of the way and the draft and free agency done, I think that Chris Johnson looked at this and said, well, I'm not going to fire the coach. We just signed him to a new contract. I haven't been too happy with Maccagnan. Some of his defects and his weaknesses have really come to the surface in the last couple of years, plus the fact that, he wasn't getting along with Gase. Now, here's where the Jets may be criticized, because Gase is an alpha male. Maccagnan is more of a laid-back, sort of a nice gentleman, and they're just two very, very different people, which makes me wonder what went on during the interview process and why Maccagnan wanted Gase to be the head coach to begin with. Maybe it was Chris Johnson. I don't know. I know that Peyton Manning called Chris Johnson and really advocated for Adam Gase. Gase is a guy who's got a lot to prove. There's no question about that. His opening press conference was very bizarre with the bug-out eyes and all that. But I think if you're a Jets fan right now, you have got to put your faith in Gase and hope that he has learned from his first go-around as the head coach in Miami, and that he's going to be a better coach this time going in. And if they get Douglas, the guy out of Philadelphia that Gase is very close to and is supposed to be a very good football man as well, I think that could be a very good parameter fit for the Jets. And now they can move into the future, under a unified front between the coach and the general manager, and we'll see what happens. So I'm really looking forward to this Jets season. Like I haven't looked forward to a Jets season in many years. I think they've upgraded the talent on the roster. There's certainly still a work in progress. It's not a completed job yet, but Darnold's going into his second year, and some of the free agent acquisitions that they've made, and so I actually like a couple of the draft picks that Maccagnan made. So we'll see. I think they're going to be more competitive this year, win a couple more games this year than they did last year, and I'm looking forward to this Jets season.
By the way, Quinnen looks like a fun guy to be around, doesn't he? Like, he just looks so relaxed and ready to play football, but he's having fun with it too.
Quinnen Williams is, I watched his press conference when he met the media. I think it was last week on the Jets website. I saw it, and He's just he just seems like a fun-loving kid who just can't wait to get out there. He's monstrously talented. He can play on the interior of the line. You can put him outside. He's got a tremendous motor, quick to the off the ball, off the snap. I'm really looking forward to seeing him play, and I'm looking forward to seeing Polite, the defensive end that they're going to play as an outside linebacker. The kid out of Florida could be one of the steals of the draft. He came into the draft with some questions. He did not have a good combine. He didn't have a good pro day, but the Jets like his upside, and if you can put some of the immature things behind him that have plagued him, and he seems intent on doing that. I mean, the kid from a physical, exotic skills standpoint, Alex, is a beast. So I'm looking forward to seeing him play as well.
All right, we can't let you go without talking about the elephant in the room, speaking of football, and that's Daniel Jones. See, the kid, Daniel Jones, had an incredible Independence Bowl, and people look at me like, well, what? So what? It was against Temple. So 4 touchdowns, 429 yards, nothing to laugh about. I mean, look, people are skeptical of it. I don't think it's a bad draft pick after all. Do you disagree with me on that?
Not at all. Not at all. I'm with you on this one. And again, going against the grain of what most people are saying. I like the pick. I think Daniel Jones has a chance to be a very good quarterback. I love his size. He doesn't have a rocket for an arm, but he doesn't need one. He's athletic. He's cerebral. I think that the Giants see a significant ceiling with him. I'd like to see him sit behind Eli for a year to soak things in, learn a little bit, but you can never tell with quarterbacks. The acceleration pace of absorbing all of the myriad information that you need to take in as a quarterback. The game is much faster at the NFL level. The progressions are more difficult, so I'd like to see him kind of be eased in instead of having him, start the season as the quarterback. But who knows? I mean, based upon, Eli and how he may play this season, you might see Daniel Jones midway through the season. And then, of course, if there's an injury involved, variables that you can't predict, you never know. Jones could be in the lineup sooner rather than later, but I'm with you. I had no issue with the pick at all. The Giants made the pick with conviction. They like the player. They feel he can be a franchise quarterback and the guy that's going to succeed Eli for many years. So we'll see. It's all a crapshoot, as you know, Alex. You never know because you're dealing with human beings and not machines, and so you don't know. But at this time, right now, and at the time they made the pick, I had no problem with it.
And that's why maybe we'll finally disagree on something here, because we've agreed all interview. I haven't heard you explode on me yet. I'm waiting for it, Dino. I'm waiting for it. But no, maybe I'll disagree with this one. I think something might happen where Zion's not the first pick. I don't know why, but I'm sensing this is all too good to be true. All the hype about it seems to be too good to be true. But maybe it will be number one. I don't know. I just don't see it happening.
Well, there we're going to disagree. I think New Orleans is going to take him number one, and he's going to be the centerpiece of their ongoing sort of retooling that they're doing in New Orleans. They've got some talent there. Anthony Davis is the huge wild card. Is David Griffin, the new GM, going to be able to persuade him to stay? I hope he does, as I think that Anthony Davis staying in New Orleans will allow the Pelicans to perhaps attract, free agents down to NOLA instead of Anthony Davis, with wanderlust in his eye and wanting to go to L.A., which they're not going to trade him to Los Angeles. That's just not going to happen. Or go, to Boston or maybe to my Brooklyn Nets or the Knicks. But they've got some talent. I am not as huge a fan of Zion Williamson as most people are. I don't think he's a franchise type player who's going to be, a guy that's going to be, mentioned along the same line of names as like Jordan and Durant and Garnett and, Larry Bird and so on and so forth. I think he could be a nice player. I don't think he's a franchise player, and we'll see. I mean, I could be wrong about that, of course, but that's what I see with Zion, and I think he's going to do very well in New Orleans. He's going to be a multimillionaire at the age of 18. He's going to get to live in New Orleans, which is a terrific city. He's going to have the same opportunities for national endorsements as he would have if he was playing in Salt Lake or Oklahoma City or Atlanta or anywhere. So I do think he's going to be number one. And the question is, who's going to be number two? Memphis has got the number 2 pick. And the other day they intimated that they would be taking John Morant at number 2. So if the Knicks at 3 are there, I think that it's probably going to be R.J. Barrett out of Duke. But then again, you never know. I mean, there's other players that the Knicks could be interested in. The Knicks could move the pick. the number 3 pick for some other assets that could help them immediately. It's going to be interesting. I think it's going to be a night. The NBA draft is going to be a night of furious activity in terms of trades. And of course, that's several weeks away, but I'm looking forward to that even as well.
I'd honestly like draft lotteries at this point for every sport because I kind of like watching everybody's brain explode on Twitter the night the Knicks got like, you know, this is a town, by the way, that booed Kristaps when he was drafted. So what do the Knicks fans want? And I'm a Knicks fan, but what do they want? You know, you're not happy with the pick, yeah, but then you're booing the Porzingis. I don't get it.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Kristaps Porzingis because I was on Twitter the night that the Giants, going back to Daniel Jones, that they selected him, and Giants fans, most of them didn't like the selection, and the fans can be fickle, very fickle, and here's the Knicks a couple of years ago, and Phil Jackson, when he was running the show, selects Kristaps Porzingis, and the kid was roundly booed. I felt bad for him that night, but went on to be a very productive player for the Knicks, and I think that when he gets better, gets away from this injury and comes back, rehabs back, I think he's going to be a very good fit in Dallas, and we'll see. But fans are fickle, that, Alex. I do. I can be like that as well. Everybody can be like that from time to time,
And by the way, Jackson doesn't get enough credit for what he did here, by the way. Let's just put that out there. He does not get enough credit for what he built here in New York. It's just a shame that the triangle offense seemed to get in the way of everything, right? So we'll have to see what happens with this year with Fizdale, with the Knicks. I don't know. But obviously, baseball heating up. Memorial Day, always the what would you like to say? The landmark, the first mark of where we are, and where do you see everybody at Memorial Day while I have you here?
Well, as far as the Mets and the Yankees are concerned, I mean, obviously I said before, I think that every Mets fan out there is really disappointed with what they've seen in the first couple of weeks of the season, as we get further into May. The Yankees, on the other hand, my goodness, I mean, how can you not be impressed with what they've done? Half their team is on the disabled list. Their number 1 pitcher is out. The guy who finished as the runner-up to the Rookie of the Year at third base, Andujar's done for the season. Stanton's out. Judge is out. Hicks was out for all those weeks, and he's recently come back. Didi's been out. Sanchez was out for a while. Paxton has been on the disabled list. I mean, but, they continue to win. And I think they're one of the most resourceful franchises in baseball. And, when you found out as a Yankees fan that Gio Urshela was going to be your third baseman, and, until further notice, I think most Yankees fans at the time said, who the hell's Gio Urshela?
Correct.
We get by with you. And this guy has been tremendous. And, no matter who they put in there, Tauchman came up. Listen, I saw Mike Tauchman when he played with the Rockies, Alex.
Yeah.
And he was garbage with Colorado. And when the Yankees made the acquisition of Tauchman, I just kind of, passed it off as, he'd be a guy that's going to be a AAA player. And not that he came up and he lit the world on fire when he was up, and I know they just recently sent him down. But my goodness, I mean, he had some big hits when he was up with the Yankees. And so they've been able to really wade through all of these injuries and continue to win. And, some people have said, well, it's been a weak schedule that they've played. The American League is weaker this year than it's been in most years. I don't care. When you have look at all the star power and the major players that were expected to contribute this year for the Yankees that have been on the shelf, haven't been playing, that should reduce the Yankees' overall ability to win, no matter who they're playing, and yet they continue to win, and I've got a great appreciation for that.
Also, I don't agree that it's been an easy schedule. You have Tampa, who's in the race, and they just won 2 out of 3 against them. So Clearly they've had some competition, and they've done well with basically nobody. Now, while you mentioned acquisitions, Luke Voit, you saw him in St. Louis. Were you surprised at how well he would excel here in New York?
Yes. Again, another guy that you just didn't see coming, right? Urshela, you didn't see him coming. Luke Voit, I didn't see him coming either. Big hits last year, no question about it. When they brought him up, really contributed. And this year I said, well, Voit has been a career minor leaguer for the most part. He couldn't crack the Cardinals lineup, and he'll revert back to form at some point. But something about going to New York and being in that uniform, he has really responded, and I think he's a much more confident player. than he's ever been in his career. He's another terrific story that the Yankees can point to as a guy that's kind of under the radar, that's come in and has done a great job for them. And another guy that a lot of Yankees fans knew nothing about, and I saw him play many years with the Rockies. I knew DJ LeMahieu was going to be a terrific fit. The only thing I didn't know about the signing of LeMahieu, at the time they made the signing, Alex, I just didn't know why they made the signing. There didn't seem any room to be any room for LeMahieu.
None. Again, LeMahieu's the number one, the leadoff guy now. So that's how funny baseball is.
He's a tremendous player. He's got bat-to-ball skills that are just outstanding. He's a tremendous defensive second baseman. They've shifted him over to third. He's played a little short. He's played second. He's DH'd. Wherever they've put him, DJ LeMahieu has responded. If you look at what he's done since the Rockies acquired him from Chicago several years ago, he got better and better and better. Every year he was in Denver. They decided not to resign him, went to the Yankees, and he's picked up with the Yankees right where he left off with the Rockies. He's been invaluable for the Yankees so far.
By the way, Gleyber Torres, great game. Then he went out to my alma mater, the Henry Viscardi School and the Viscardi Center, to accept a humanitarian award last night. I want to get that in there before I ended this podcast because very, very special moment there at my old high school. Anyway, Dino, I've got to do this again. I talk way too much about politics, and yet this is my bread and butter, sports, and you're bringing it out of me, man. So thank you so much for that and for joining this podcast tonight.
Alex, it was my pleasure to be on with you. Thank you for the invitation. Anytime, please reach out to me, and please say hello to all the people at 970. Some great people there that I got to know and worked with many of them and had a great time, great memories from being there last year, and just make sure that everybody knows I said hello, okay?
Oh, they all see my Facebook, so I'm sure they're going to hear about it. All right? Dino, thank you, man, and God bless.
Same to you, Alex. Take care.
Take care. I'm Alexander Garrett. Thanks for listening to this edition of Keeping It Real with Alexander Garrett.